I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The provision of cheap and reliable energy is the single greatest driver for prosperity within a country. If your goal is to increase the living standards of the people within a country like Australia, providing energy at the lowest possible cost must be your number one priority. The so-named cost of living crisis felt by you and I can be directly attributed to the ever-increasing cost of energy right across the board. Energy and the nation's demands for electricity, gas and oil impacts everything about our lives, and you cannot escape it. Unless, of course, you hide yourself away in a wooden shack in the middle of nowhere with a wood-fired stove and candlelight. From the clothes on your back to modern technology, the food we eat, the water we drink, absolutely everything is dependent on these resources and the provision of energy to make it happen. If you want to drive down the cost, then you have to start by driving down the cost of mining, processing, manufacturing, transport and selling by lowering the cost of energy. A lot is talked about the current cost of living and the current rate of inflation, but our current inflation numbers, well, of a concern, is not the main reason that households are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. This current economic crisis has been building for 2 decades, and what you and I are feeling in 2025 is the pinnacle, the climax of an economic trend that we've been absorbing since shortly after the turn of the century. In 2002, the Australian average petrol price was 87 cents per litre. Put 75 litres in your average car and it will cost a bit over $65. In 2010, that increased to $1.26 per litre, and in 2014, $1.49 or $111.75 to fill up your car. But now in 2025, the average is around $1.95 per litre and $146 to fill it up. To further highlight the impact, News.com reported in September 2024, in the 12 months to June 2024, fuel prices rose by 7.7%, more than twice the 3.8% rise of the Consumer Price Index. It's also worth pointing out that within the current, let's call it $2 per litre, there's the federal government's fuel excise and GST, which accounts for approximately 98 cents of that $2. So if you take out the excise component, you'd only be paying on average around $1.05 per litre. You'll also notice similar dramatic increases across utility prices, electricity, gas, water and sewerage. It's not just the 3.8% inflation we have at the moment, but the dramatic increases in prices over the last 2 decades, which is creating the cost crisis we're now experiencing. But even back in December 2010, the Reserve Bank of Australia touched on the impact of rapidly increasing utility prices and the significant impact this was having on inflation and the CPI. You can see in their graph the dramatic upward trend from the beginning of the century to 2010. Energy Consumers Australia published a report showing the continually climbing prices for electricity and gas prices from 2009 to 2022. And once again, it's not just the increases we're feeling between 2022 and 25, but the sharp increases over the last 1 to 2 decades. The prices for electricity have increased dramatically, and we're in a crisis because we've reached the tipping point, the point of saturation, whereby as households, we can no longer continue to absorb price increases on essential, everyday energy prices, electricity, gas, and petrol. Now compare these increases to wages growth over the same period. In 2000, Australian wage growth sat at 3.1%, pretty much in line with inflation, and the minimum hourly rate was $15 an hour. Wage growth fluctuated slightly for the next decade or so, but by 2013 it dipped down to 2.6%, and the average minimum hourly rate of pay had only increased to $17.29. Then in 2016 it dropped to 1.9%, and then even lower to 1.5% in 2021. And the minimum hourly rate was around $19.85 or $794 a week gross for a 40-hour week. The dramatic increases in energy prices since 2000 until today, and the subsequent impact that has had, not just on household expenditure, but but also to other aspects of our cost of living, has led us to the point we're now at. Mining, agriculture, processing, manufacturing, storage, transport and shipping have all also been impacted by the increases in energy prices, and the flow-on effect at every point of delivering the goods and services to you, the consumer, has outstripped real wages growth, and it's biting hard. Aside from the economic vandalism of plunging Australia into dangerous levels of debt, the Australian government's insistence on pursuing renewable energy has only resulted in even higher energy prices and insecurity of the energy grid. Manufacturing and processing plants are shutting down because they can no longer afford the higher energy prices and have shipped their facilities overseas. The government cannot adequately pursue and fund vital infrastructure works to raise productivity and boost the economy because the money is being tied up within the renewable scheme, and households are having to endure record level energy prices whilst at the same time having to accept blackouts because the energy grid cannot cope with demand. Driving energy prices down to their lowest possible point is vital for Australia's future. It will be the single greatest driver towards ending the cost of living crisis, and nuclear energy is the only option for achieving that. Safe, reliable, cheap, emission-free energy for the people, business and the planet. The federal government must work with the state governments to shore up our gas supplies and give the Australian people the #1 priority for using our own natural gas before it's sold overseas. A reduction of 20% in the fuel excise across the board would ease household budget pressures and reduce transport, agricultural, mining and manufacturing costs, which then also flows on to the end user. Developing our own Australian nuclear energy program that includes nuclear waste storage facilities, processes and makes our own fuel rods, and invests in nuclear R&D to develop nuclear technologies that build an even greater and safer nuclear energy industry would create and generate much needed additional revenue for the national economy and also eliminate the need for any further tax increases. Energy is the key for this country's future prosperity. It cannot, in any way, be understated. It's vital that we look for every opportunity to lower the cost to the lowest possible point in order to revitalise our manufacturing and raw material processing facilities, in order to ease household pressures and to lay the economic foundations for future generations to thrive and to prosper.